definition alone, they're inferior films. Films. Sequels suck. Sequels suck. Sequels suck.
Welcome back, movie fans. This is Sequel Sucks. I'm Cable Brandon, and this is episode 3, The Lost World Jurassic Park. I've got two men on the line. I thought it's a sequel of Sequel Sucks, so I've got to bring back two people, like all sequels, that have been in previous sequel episodes. So the first one on the line, Angus, how are you, mate?
I'm sensational, mate. Glad to be back again and very excited to talk about this movie.
And it was something you saw in your childhood that you really enjoyed, or?
Oh, absolutely. The first two Jurassic Park films, massive part of my childhood. I think that the joy of the first one really carried through to me wanting to go to the cinema nonstop as a kid. Like seeing that at cinema, that's what movies were. Movies are great. I want to go to the movies all the time. And Jurassic Park is probably responsible for me watching a lot of crap movies at the cinema because I didn't care after I saw that movie. I think I was in primary school, maybe grade 4, and my teacher saw it. And she came to school the next day. She's like, I saw this amazing movie. There's dinosaurs that eat people. It's great. Your kid's got to go. I'm like, this is bad teaching, but I'll listen. And I convinced my mum and we went. And from then on, I was like, if that's what movies are, I just want to go forever. And the sequel was no different. When that came out, I was there opening weekend and have never stopped loving it.
So it's your sort of version of Star Wars that was for the kids of the 70s.
I definitely got way more excited about this than Star Wars, for sure.
And the other man on the line, all the way from Canada, and very early in the morning, reached out to me, said, I have to be on this episode. And I know he's a huge Jurassic Park fan as well. Ben Waterworth.
Hello. I haven't got an accent. I feel people are probably disappointed. But no, I did. I saw you post this, Cable, and I was like, I'm offended. I'm a millennial. I need to be on this episode. But I was on your first one, a sequel suck about The Last Jedi, and similar to Angus, I mean, Jurassic Park to me is maybe the one franchise, this and James Bond maybe, that are probably bigger than Star Wars for me. So, this franchise has formed a long part of my life, and I open any opportunity to talking about it, particularly this one. I feel this is the one of the franchise that needs the love because this is a great movie.
Okay, so you actually touched on something that me and Angus wanted to talk about in Jaws 2. There was a snake in the backyard. There was kids screaming in the pool. So we sort of got distracted. But you talked about James Bond, but I just want to quickly talk about the late, great Sean Connery. And Ben, I know you're a huge Bond fan. Was he your favorite Bond? Or give us your best Sean Connery movie.
He actually is not my favorite Bond. He's my second favorite Bond.
I just got to cut you out of the chat.
Do you want me to start that again?
No, continue.
Oh, right. Oh,
that's all right.
I thought there was a technical issue. I was taking that
seriously. I do love you.
Technically, he hates you now because you didn't put Sean Connery number 1.
Okay.
No, I appreciate your honesty. I know you're a big Roger Moore fan, so
no. It's
oh,
a Brosnan.
Wow.
I'm a Brosnan man. You're thinking the other co-host that I do that with, but it was sad. Still, obviously, a bit of a shock in some ways, and other ways, the guy was 90, he lived a good life, so it's not like he was 25, and it's fresh under the wings. But he was a great actor, in and out of James Bond. I mean, if I had to pick one outside of James Bond, I'm an Entrapment fan. I mean, who doesn't want to stare at Catherine Zeta-Jones and Sean Connery for 90 minutes? Finding Forrester, I remember watching that a lot in school and really loving that. The Highlander, all these movies. Indiana Jones, Last Crusade, of course. But if I had to pick a Bond that is just fun and just absolutely stupid fun, Diamonds Are Forever. Put that on to just take your mind off life and watch Sean Connery talk about walking his pet rat. I mean, who doesn't want to watch that?
Angus?
I was, again, similar, saddened but not surprised. I mean, when I first heard Sean Connery dead, I went, oh, and then I read the rest of the sentence at 90, and I went, nah, what are you going to do? He's 90 years old. He's Scottish. Like that, for a Scotsman, that is an insanely good innings. They don't last. My dad's Scottish, or half my family's. I know they don't last. But I'm a I'm a big Bond fan. That's
Oh wow,
That's
he's got
my
the
first-
tat.
showing a tattoo. It's my first tattoo I got when I was 17 years old. I went out and got a James
Wow.
Bond tattoo. I love it. And he is my favorite, but not. It's very strange. Sean Connery is my favorite Bond, but not because I think he's the best Bond. I think he's my favorite because I can't get past the fact that he did it first and he did it well, and he did a Bond that we're just never ever going to get again. Like I appreciate Bond, the whole catch to it is he just keeps reinventing, and that's what makes it so interesting. Every time there's a new act, you're like, this is a totally different franchise now, and you get the bits that you love, but we're not going to be tied down to the past. But I think what he did is so quintessentially Bond and so exciting and so closely linked in the early films to what was being written in the books, and you were getting just this wow factor with the first ones. And I think we suffer a bit now from Bourne-itis and Austin Powers-itis, where we can't watch Bond the same way anymore. It's just not possible. Like you watch the Daniel Craig Bond, it's like, well, this is a direct response to the Bourne supremacy and all those films because they couldn't not acknowledge it. It has to be more hand-to-hand combat and shaky camera, and you can't just get a glamorous guy in a tuxedo lying on a beach and shooting a bad guy and then shagging a woman and going to the sunset without people going, well, that's Austin Powers. Like there's so little room for them to go, but he crushed it. And I think that he'll always be my favorite just because he is the most Bond of the Bonds.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Like 90 is an amazing innings, and it's so weird. I reckon a couple months ago, I actually thought to myself, I'm like, oh, is Sean Connery still with us? Like, it feels like because he's like I actually saw and fell asleep to the movie The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen that was in, and that was one of the reasons I went to see that was because he was in it.
Yeah, I think that's why everyone saw it.
I've obviously got the DNA from my father when he introduced me to James Bond. Like his favorite, two favorite actors, Clint Eastwood and Sean Connery, and he would watch him in anything. He'd watch them if it was just a video of them mowing their lawn for 60 minutes. Like Dad would go and hire it because they were in it. So
that's better than the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Yeah, well, yeah. So I think it's sort of, for me, it's a little bit sad too. That I mean, for me, that was one of my connects to my dad who's passed away now. So then it's kind of weird. Like, okay, I've got no real connection to Sean Connery, but he's gone now, so it's kind of like, oh, like it's hard to explain, but it's sort of like another thing's finished in that part of my life, if that makes any sort of sense.
Absolutely.
Did love him in The Rock, and it's funny. I love that you brought up
The Rock.
I love that you brought up Entrapment because that may not be the greatest film, but I remember Dad saying we've got to go see Sean Connery in this, and didn't even know who Catherine Zeta-Jones was. And like, well, there's another bonus.
There was a part of your dad that was seeing.
I knew her from The Mask of Zorro. Dad had no idea, so Dad just knew it was a Sean Connery. But I think Dad then realized.
I don't think he was disappointed when he saw Catherine Zeta-Jones in that movie, though.
And then the
that laser scene made me hit puberty, I feel.
Yeah, and the funniest thing about it was I even back then was collecting a lot of DVDs by it, and Dad didn't like it. He's like, you don't need to buy all these DVDs. How many times can you watch the same movie? Which is weird because he would watch James Bond endlessly or Clint Eastwood on TV. He wouldn't be buying it. But then when Entrapment obviously came in on DVD, that was one of the gifts he got me for Christmas. So I was like, oh, it's funny that, but he's like, oh, we've got to watch that tonight. No,
This is for you, but it's really for me. Put it on, son.
Yeah, but
Happy birthday.
I guess when everyone was talking and reminiscing about the late great Sean Connery, that Entrapment didn't seem to get mentioned a lot in all the great movies he was in, which was
I feel like it's treated as a bit of a disposable film, but it stands up. Like it's a good.
It does.
It stands up also as a 90s. I don't know what you call it, spy thriller or whatever it is. There's a lot of films in the 90s that were kind of like that you can forget. Like, I'm going to forget the name of it now, but it was Sharon Stone and Sylvester Stallone, and he blows stuff up. The Specialist.
Yeah.
And things like that. A lot of those movies came out where it was like action guy, sexy girl. The action guy is too old for the sexy girl, but you forgive it because, I don't know, their names from posters. And you watch it, you're like, that was good. And then the year 2000 came, you're like, I never need to watch any of those movies again. And Entrapment kind of got lumped in. But if people pull that out and watch it, they're going to be pleasantly surprised. It really is a fun movie.
They had a lot of those movies in that period, didn't they? The one that randomly sprung to mind, and it's not an action movie, but 6 Days, 7 Nights, when it's like, hey, let's shove Harrison Ford with Anne Heche on a beach together for, 90 minutes because why not? It was just an odd quirk of that period. And the 90s were very much like that, weren't they? They were like, let's just all of a sudden do a certain type of genre, make that crazy for 5 minutes, and we'll just roll with it. We had meteoroid battles, and we had volcano battles, and we had tornado, like everything was just in twos essentially in the 90s. I mean, with what we're talking about today, you have Godzilla a year later, essentially, Roland Emmerich's version of Jurassic Park, you could almost say. So yeah, what a glorious time the 90s were when it came to these type of films. They're coming back now. Let's be honest. It's cool to watch these movies again.
Yeah, it is. I think especially in the next couple of years, we're going to see a lot more of these movies come in because people have just gone through a year of being a bit stressed out. And people are going to want a lot more of like, hey, do you just want to go watch some beautiful people in beautiful locations? There'll be a bomb or a waterfall or a car chase. Who cares? And it'll cost you $19 and you'll get some popcorn. And everyone will go, yes, please. I'd really like that.
Yep.
So we better start talking about this movie that we're going to be talking about today. Ben, we spoke off air. You read the book. You read the first book. I read the first book. I've got. We both own a copy. And then Michael Crichton got pressured into writing a sequel. Something he didn't really want to do. Did it anyway. The movie doesn't necessarily uses some key points in it, but overall, they sort of did still move away from the book a fair bit and did a lot of their own original stuff. Spielberg and David Koepp, who wrote the screenplay. I mean, what's your take? Did you actually like the sequel book?
I don't actually think I read the sequel book until after I'd seen the movie. I mean, I was 10 to date myself when this movie came out. And I mean, I do remember reading a large portion of the original novel in between that. And again, I'm, between the ages of 6 and 10. So a novel like Jurassic Park is very much advanced for poor little Ben Waterworth. But I think kind of when I eventually did read it and you kind of, took the level of what they got, because I think, the one biggest thing to me from the book that always confused me before reading The Lost World, and I think even seeing the movie, was the fact that Malcolm dies in the original book. And then, of course, you've got a whole sequel essentially centered around this character of Malcolm, which is just kind of brushed off in the sequel. Like, oh, they thought he died, but no, he survived. Just kidding. So that was always the biggest question I had. But I think, the novel compared to this movie is a far more, like, obviously the original Jurassic Park, if you read the book, there's a lot different, but it's also kind of very similar. Whereas this takes so much away from the book. And you've seen that now in the sequels that have followed this one, that they've used elements of that in Jurassic Park 3, even in Fallen Kingdom, even in Jurassic World. So they've kind of still using some of these elements, which is a good thing because there's so much in the book that is unfortunate that they didn't use, like, the whole fight at the end with, the flying, the pterodons and all kind of things like that. And just some of the other elements that are in the book that unfortunately didn't make the movie. But yeah, the movie's still fantastic. I alluded to it before that this is maybe to me the most underappreciated Jurassic Park movie of all of them. And controversial opinion, this and Fallen Kingdom. I'm going to say that right now. But Lost World is a great movie, and the book is great as well.
Angus, so did you ever read the books pre-movies or after the movie, or
post movies? Yeah, never read them pre-movies. Post movies, I found in my local secondhand bookshop. I was just hanging out one day and I saw Jurassic Park and Lost World side by side. I knew Jurassic Park was a book, but I don't think I clicked that Lost World was a book at the time. And so I'd always had in the back of my head, I'll read that one. And I saw them both. And I just remember like this little joygasm being like, what? And for like $8, just snatched them both out and went home and read them both, and being very surprised as a young man reading this that, wait a minute, hang on a second. Like, if everyone who in the movie is a certain way and lives is a different way and dies in the first book, Hammond is an absolute prick. He's the bad guy. He's a pure bad guy, and he dies a horrible death in the original book. And you're like, yeah, good. And Muldoon is a rock star.
Yeah,
and saves the day, and is like the best fucking guy ever. And the lawyer is one of the best dudes ever. He's like the nicest guy in the world. I can't remember his name right now, but he's the
Gennaro.
Gennaro.
Holy Gennaro is Die Hard. Is that the same?
The real prick in the book is the one who gets pinned against a tree by the T-Rex, and they basically turn that into Gennaro in the movie. I can't remember the character's name in the book. There was one that didn't even appear in the movie, but
I can't remember his name either. And I do remember, like, I read them back to back, and I got to the end of Jurassic Park, and I was like, how's Malcolm dead? What's going on there? And then immediately going to the second one, and I can't remember how they did it, but I remember even being a young guy reading it and going, "Oh, come on, come on, you can do better than that." But yeah, love the books. Highly recommend. Anyone who even has a passing interest in Jurassic Park movies should read the books, because it's a really great, like, extra tier of love you can get out of this series.
Well, what I was going to say was I read the book, The Lost World, obviously when it pretty much dropped. And it's funny because the internet was still relatively new back then. So I don't know where I remember getting this information, but it must have been in a magazine or a newspaper when they were at, when you could actually see some sort of book reviews. And I remember it was, again, I was reading it as a 16-year-old. So for me, it was still a good book, but I think because it was so rushed and Crichton was definitely, he wasn't keen on doing it. It was a lot of pressure, and I'm sure he got paid a lot of money to write another book. But people did comment, and a lot of reviews slammed it, saying it's just a glorified screenplay for the sequel movie, and it's just, and you definitely can see it, like the amount of pages and the amount of work put into the first Jurassic Park book. It's so extensive, whereas when you go to the next one, it is like a bit of pulp. Like, it's just, it is what it is.
Which is really interesting, because Spielberg deliberately left the shaving can after Nedry gets killed in the first film kind of as a bit of a back door. Here you go, guys. Here's your sequel. This is what you've got for your next one if you want to make one. And it's interesting, isn't it, that essentially they go, oh, well, we'll make a sequel once Michael writes a book. Like that's never going to fly today in Hollywood, is it? Like, Disney aren't going to sit around. Oh, we might not make another Star Wars until somebody writes a book on it first. Like, no, that's not how it works. They've got 30 in development already. So it's really interesting that A, they take that treatment, and B, like, Spielberg's just handballing them. Here you go, guys. Here's your sequel. Oh, no, we're not going to go with that direction. There's a site B. Okay, cool. Well, let's go with that instead. And also that Spielberg even came back and directed, because he avoided sequels, did he not, forever?
Well, this is something we talked about on Jaws 2.
Yeah,
I guess the exception to the exception to the rule being Indiana Jones, but
yes.
Apart from
but
that,
he said after Jaws, we talked about this in the last episode I was on, that sequels are a cheap carny trick that are only ever there for money. And then he's changed his tune over subsequent interviews, where he's softened a bit more and a bit more and a bit more, as obviously, I don't know, more money.
The money.
But I did always find that
up.
so strange, the way that Lost World came to be, because Spielberg of all directors was not a sequel guy. He was not making movies to make another movie. And he says in Jaws, I made the definitive shark movie. Why would I ever make another one? Well, in Jurassic Park, he made the definitive dinosaur movie. Why do you ever need to make another dinosaur movie?
Which is,
and for some reason he did, and then ignored any sort of direct link, save for Ian Malcolm, and just made this totally different beast.
Which is it's really interesting, I think, because this is where I hope we can talk about this on the episode. Like, I feel that a lot of people forget that he directed the second one. This is where I think kind of people lump the negativity of this movie, and they either deliberately avoid the fact that Spielberg directed it because they don't want to tarnish his name, or they just forget, because there's so much to this film which I will defend, and I think kind of there's so much to his directorial style that kind of enhances in this second one that he doesn't get credit for. And it's interesting. Like, it's not the first movie. Let's be honest. It is not. Nothing will ever be the first Jurassic Park. To me, Jurassic Park is the single greatest movie ever made. That is my opinion.
Wow.
And everyone else who disagrees with me is completely wrong. But I think that from what you get from the sequels and everything else like this is still such a fun movie that it does everything it can to live up. And there's something about this movie that I just feel one day is going to click with people, and then people are going to realize that this film is actually a good movie.
I'll be honest, that I have never really encountered much resistance to Lost World in my social circles, or in any. I mean, I haven't sat around and read a bunch of reviews in adulthood, but I've never known the Lost World Jurassic Park to be the shunned one. It's always, if you're talking Jurassic Parks that don't get, it's always Jurassic Park 3 that is absolutely eviscerated. I've never really heard a lot of people in my social circle, at least, who don't like it. Like, all my friends are very similar to me and love Jurassic Park, and we will all sit around and watch the first or the second one any day of the week, and we don't really care. Like, if people are going to pull one off the shelf, it doesn't need to be a discussion. If you pick one or two, we really don't mind. We're going to be happy either way. But it is interesting that it's so just very, very forgotten now. Like, especially with the resurgence of Jurassic Park, with the Jurassic World series coming along, I would have thought that people would be talking about this movie a lot more than they have, and be like, "Oh, Ian Malcolm's back. Well, he was in the first and the second one." But when he did that cameo, it was kind of like, "Yeah, Ian Malcolm from Jurassic Park." It's like, he was fourth build in Jurassic Park. He wasn't he was the main guy in Lost World. Why aren't you talking about that one? That's the good one.
Yeah.
So
It
it's so
seems though,
strange.
it does seem though that with Dominion, that kind of one of the teaser posters that was leaked, or the teaser set, I guess, photos, was that there was a box with the word Site B on it. And I think kind of a lot of people question in Fallen Kingdom when they're talking about, oh, we've got to get these dinosaurs off Isla Nublar because there's nowhere else we can have them. It's like, well, hello, Isla Sorna exists. Like, where's Site B? And everyone was always questioning that. But I think like there's a lot of talk about Dominion, not to get into sort of spoiler territory in that there's going to be a heavy focus on Site B, maybe with the dinosaurs on the mainland. Now they're going to take them back there. But canon, if you actually know sort of what's happens in Jurassic Park canon, Isla Sorna is basically wiped off the map. There was a hurricane, I think, kind of a few years after this, and basically,
which was meant to be. I could
the
be
book.
mixing up my research here, but wasn't that meant to be something that was referenced initially in Lost World, that they lost
Yeah,
the first island, it's gone, and then they never really got around to talking about that.
I think there's a loose mention in the movie as well from memory, but because obviously they go back to Isla Sorna for Jurassic Park 3, completely different part of the island. People often question the, well, this looks completely different, like it's a different side of the island and everything along those lines. I know way too much about this stuff apparently, but yeah, like in kind of in canon, that like there is a whole new element to why Site B isn't a thing anymore in the Jurassic World.
Well, yeah, Hammond does say it at the start of Lost World. He pretty much says there is a Site B, and they let it go because they had to evacuate everyone. There was, like you said, there was a hurricane, or there was some sort of issue weather-wise that was a massive thing. They had to evacuate everyone, and then they pretty much left it to survive on its own, I guess. So, but
and there's activity as well. Like there's the little people complained about Isla Nublar in Fallen Kingdom. Well, there's no volcanoes. What are you talking about? If you actually pay attention to this movie, they talk about geothermic or whatever it's called, like power that controls the island, which is clearly these islands are on like a volcanic chain. So just random little things that I love that people complain about, that these movies don't make sense. But if you actually pay attention to what they're saying, they make sense.
All right. So I guess for me, one of the elephants in the room, like I've ebbed and flowed on if I love this movie or I don't like this movie. But I guess the point of the sequel is, I guess the story is that there is the Site B. Did you like that? Because I know you mentioned it just about 5 minutes ago, Ben, that one of the things that Spielberg left as a hook for a potential sequel was the Dennis Nedry's, aerosol can with the DNA, left in the mud, that might be the hook to sort of, have a future movie. But Michael Crichton came up with the idea of the Site B. Did you guys like that? I'll go to you first, Ben. Did you like the idea of a Site B, or did you think that was for me, I think that was a little bit too much, but I was happy to sort of live with it.
Look, on paper, yes. I think kind of each of the sequels lives in their own world where you can kind of realistically, you look at the plot of each Jurassic Park movie, it's literally the same. But it adds something new to it. And I remember when this movie came out, the promotion around it and kind of the big hook for this was that there's more dinosaurs, you're going to see even more, because back then people were sort of complaining, oh, we didn't see dinosaurs until an hour in, and then they're all gone and things like that. Like this was the hook behind this. So you need to go somewhere new, I feel, to have more dinosaurs, and this makes sense in a way that you would have a breeding ground. In a way, it doesn't also make sense, because when Hammond goes into this whole explanation of like, yes, this was the factory floor, we built them here, then we took them to Isla Nublar. It's like, well, dude, we literally saw you breed the egg in front of us in the thing.
And,
again,
and saying in no uncertain terms that you insist on being there when every single one is born.
Exactly. You must have some helicopter fuel vouchers somewhere, mate, if you're going between the two islands constantly. But I mean, again, that is something that is also retconned in some of the other exterior material. But yeah, I think I think in terms of the setup, it works. At the same time, the one thing that kind of like doesn't work is like Jurassic Park is sort of, it's the wonder of seeing these creatures and interact with humans and actually really thinking about A, is this possible? And B, well, what would this be like if you could go to a zoo where there's dinosaurs? You know what I mean? This is kind of almost, it's almost like a King Kong style thing where they just can discover an island and there just happen to be dinosaurs living there. It doesn't have quite the same feel and wonder that the first one does. So to answer your question, yes, I like the idea, but I also can see the negativity around it, where it doesn't quite work the same as what it does in the first movie.
Angus?
I think this film, I think it's a film that if critics are going to complain about, oh, there's another island, very quickly you've just got to address them. Well, what do you actually want? What did you want from the second Jurassic Park? Because if you wanted them to go back to the same island, to the same park, and see what few dinosaurs had survived and try and retcon an idea about how they survived when they've got the enzyme deficiency they bred into them, so they'll die in 7 days without the injections and they can't make all of these things that are laid into the first one, that these dinosaurs can't exist without people. If you go back to the same island, to the same location, you're boned, because all you're doing is just retreading the same ground. It gets very boring. But I think the brilliance of moving to a separate island is you get all of the pre-set knowledge from the first one about dinosaurs. You don't have to explain how they got here. All that's done. We don't have to cover how we brought dinosaurs back to life. They exist in this world. That's it. Now you get to go into the wild with dinosaurs, which is honestly way more interesting. And I think it's kind of funny that Steven Spielberg initially refused to do a sequel to Jaws, because this movie shows us what Steven Spielberg's Jaws 2 would have been. Because Jurassic Park is just Jaws. It's the same movie. Yeah. It starts off as a real slow burn thriller. There's a lot of political drama where money is the biggest evil of all. And then it turns into the third act is just these lone survivors trying to topple the beast. And then Jurassic Park 2, it's totally different. It's such a brilliant film because the three acts of this film are three separate films. They're completely, the first movie, it's a tight little group of 4 people plus a stowaway child, and they go on the island, and now there's no walls, no fences, no nothing. It's just them and the dinosaurs. That's it. And it's this little survival. It starts as a rescue mission, and it's a little survival adventure. And then on a dime, it turns, and suddenly there's an army of people there, and now it's an action movie. It's a balls out action film. There's guns, there's trucks, there's explosions, there's bombs. It's a full on movie. And then right when that movie, and it literally finishes, they get choppered out at the end of the movie, it's done. And that movie finishes, and then they go to the third act, and now it's King Kong, down to the fact that the boat is the SS Venture, which is the boat they bring Kong back to New York in. It's 3 separate films that Spielberg has put together to make one brilliant film. I also think this movie deserves more love because what it is, it's aliens. Jurassic Park is Alien. It's a tight little thriller. It's scary. There's a lot of tension going on. This movie is aliens. Okay, we're not going to be scary anymore in the way that we're going to build that tension around, ooh, what is it? What's going to happen? We know what's going to happen. The T-Rex is going to eat a bunch of fucking people. That's the point. This time we're going to give it to you and more. Now there's 2 T-Rexes. Now there's a whole bunch of velociraptors loose. Now there's a whole bunch of people who have no names and no character building at all because they are just there to be food. And that's what you want, because the last movie you complained, kids were writing letters to David Kopp, be like, there wasn't enough dinosaurs. You didn't put in a stegosaurus. I'm really sad. So right, we're going to have 50% more dinosaurs right out the gate, and you're going to see them eat so many people. Is that what you want? And everyone went, fuck yeah, that's what I want. And it's this huge action adventure film. And I cannot imagine what else you would possibly want from a second Jurassic Park. Don't get back to the park. Who cares?
I just want to quickly ask a question with this letter writing thing, right? Because, this is something that seems to work in movies, right? We know that Jaws basically got turned into a good guy Moonraker because kids thought, hey, what would be great if Jaws was good instead of being evil? Do you think if I write to Colin Trevorrow, I know they've just wrapped on Dominion, but it has been now 27 years since we've seen the Dilophosaurus in a Jurassic Park movie, and no, a hologram doesn't fucking count, and a sound in the jungle doesn't count. I want my Dilophosaurus back. Where the hell is a Dilophosaurus? So I'm going to write a letter to Colin and see if he can make it a thing.
Yeah, but you have to pretend you're an 8-year-old kid. That's the only thing that'll get you any kind of credit.
You got to do it in crayon.
That's easy. Still don't know how to read my writing. So, yeah.
Well, you know what blows my mind is that kids knew, or parents knew, who to send the mail to.
Yeah.
Because I did read that about him getting, you think Spielberg would get the mail, but no, the screenwriter, anyway.
It was the 90s, Cable. Just every screenwriter wasn't famous.
The kid just probably walked onto the studio lot, was like, excuse me, I'm looking for the guy that did write that dinosaur movie. And that was Bungalow 6. Excuse me, this is for you. And no one gave a crap then. This is pre 9/11. You could do whatever you wanted.
The good old days.
No, look, I'll openly admit I watched it again the other night and really enjoyed it, and just turn the brain off, and like you two would say, it's probably unfairly criticized, but I still see some issues with it, or things I just can't get over. And
Well, I've got an issue, and I'm curious about
Yep.
what you two think of this, because it's right out of the gate. I
Yes.
hate the title so much I can barely say it out loud. It
The
drives
Lost
me
World.
insane. The Lost World, Jurassic Park. Say that
It's
out
really the
loud.
other
The
way
Lost
around.
World. The Lost World, Jurassic. Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
In the 1,000 meetings they had to have to get this film off the ground and into cinemas, at what point did someone decide that the Lost, because they initially was just going to be called The Lost World, and they're like, people might not know it's a Jurassic Park movie. Fair. I get it. You're trying to make a franchise. Who was the asshole who decided to put Jurassic Park after Lost World? It's the most awkward title ever, and I despise it. I cannot handle it. It drives me insane. Does it bother you guys the same way it bothers me?
A little bit, because I feel like, being that age and going to a sequel, to me it was always Jurassic Park 2, and then obviously you realize it's Site B, so technically it's not Jurassic Park, so it kind of has to be The Lost World, but it's the Jurassic Park sequel. It's kind of a weird thing. I guess where I don't like it as well is because this movie is heavily influenced by the movie The Lost World that was like 1926 or whatever, like that. So I was like, well, you've heavily referenced that. It's a really important movie to, like, Michael Crichton apparently loved that movie, Spielberg, and so it's heavily influential. But why call that the same title? Like, it's just call it Jurassic Park 2 or
The Lost World, wasn't it? They didn't have to add Jurassic Park to it. But yeah, I mean, I agree. It's. I mean, look, I think the problem the entire franchise has is an identity crisis, and I mean, this is the only one that doesn't start Jurassic. I think this should be called Jurassic Park 2: The Lost World. Simple as that. Like, I mean, we've renamed the Star Wars movies how many times? So why can't we do this? I think kind of. I'll be honest with you. The one thing that annoys me more is the fact that they've renamed this Jurassic World, and now people refer to this as the Jurassic World franchise. That annoys me.
Oh no, none of that. I'll have none of that.
Yeah, it's not. It's the fucking Jurassic Park franchise. People, shut
The
up.
only title that annoys me more is Jurassic Park 3. I can't. It's a personal
it doesn't fit,
hatred.
does it? Yeah.
Any film where they have a 3 but there was never a number 2, you can go to hell, and I never want to hear from you again. That's just the laziest thing ever. That's just the writers telling you before you sit down the cinema, we put in the bare minimum. We couldn't even be bothered coming up with a title that made sense to the rest of the franchise.
Which is just Jurassic Park 3, though, right? That just sums up the movie.
Yeah. Yes.
I mean, look, I will probably defend Jurassic Park 3 more than some, but I'm not going to defend it as much as I'm going to defend this movie. Like, Jurassic Park 3 is just, take my money. I know what I'm in for. Cool. There's a Spinosaurus and a raptor that says Alan. That's about what you're going to get. Okay, cool. I got my money.
The only interesting bit of trivia I found out at Jurassic Park 3 and watching this one is that Joe Johnston vehemently campaigned to get this movie. And Spielberg was like, nah, I kind of want to do it. You can have the next one as the scrap. And then Joe Johnston got the next one. And everyone was like, ugh, why did we do that? Never again.
And Joe Johnston started in Star Wars.
Did he?
Yeah, he was visual effects back in, I think it was a New Hope, but definitely Empire.
The holiday
Strikes Back,
special?
So,
Well, then he should know. But yeah,
so
Jurassic Park 3 looks like someone who worked on the holiday special.
Yeah, so Joe Johnston definitely had his background in that kind of visual effects sort of stuff. But it's funny now that you bring it up, and I don't want to deviate too far and go off on another tangent, but it is weird to have Jurassic Park, then the Lost World Jurassic Park, and then Jurassic Park 3. But again, Jurassic Park 3 is in Site B, so it's like, but is it really Jurassic Park anymore? Like,
it's the same. Coming back to Alien again, it's the same problem with Alien. You have Alien, you have Aliens, and you have Alien 3. But it's Alien 3, but they did it like it was Alien Cubed, but there was only one fucking alien. So why are you trying to do that? Look, I could go on about this all day. Fast and the Furious, they do it too. They can go to hell. Anyway,
Too Fast, Too Furious.
Yeah, it goes Fast and the Furious, Too Fast, Too Furious, Fast and the Furious 3. There was never.
But then
And
don't
then
you have like Fast 4, then they remove the from one of them and just call it Fast and Furious. And then
so the fourth one is Fast and Furious. It's the most confused. There's the Fast and the Furious, Too Fast, Too Furious, Fast and the Furious 3, Tokyo Drift, Fast and Furious, Furious 5, Fast and the Furious 6, Furious 7, and then 8 was The Fate of the Furious, and then they retitled it 9 times until it became like Furious 8. But I think they put the 8 as the U for some reason.
Wow.
So it was like Fatigurous. And then Hobbs and Shaw was Hobbs and Shaw, and then they retitled that Fast and the Furious presents Hobbs and Shaw. I hate those movies, and I don't know too much about them, and I've deviated. But look, titles
we
matter.
have because they are. I'm sorry, I'm not a car person, so I saw the first two, and that was it. Enough for
Yeah,
me.
no, they you talk about money wasted. Yeah, there you go. How many countries in Africa could have been saved if they hadn't spent billions of dollars on the Fast and the Furious franchise?
And
Wow.
I love The Rock. I love The Rock so
Yeah.
much, and I still won't
Yes.
watch the ones he's in.
Nah, yes.
Like, I don't care.
I'm-
I don't want to watch you drive and crash and drive. Anyway,
So back to The Lost World. The one thing I will say that I like, and Ben can sort of back me up, well, you both can because you read the books. The one thing that I did like, there was so much in that first book. And in hindsight, if they wanted to almost make that first book almost to the page, to the word, you'd have a 10-hour movie, or it would actually be an excellent series like on Netflix or something like that, or Amazon, that they could do 10 1-hour episodes, but it'd be violent as fuck. I can tell you that much.
Oh yeah.
be great.
But it would be, I think it would be an awesome series. But obviously, because there was so much in there, there was a lot of good stuff that I was spewing we didn't get to see, that thankfully they actually did put in The Lost World. So the girl, it's slightly different. It's not quite a yacht and a rich British family, but a girl coming to the island and then the compies sort of attacking her was in the book. And we actually got to see that, which I think was really cool. And then the other one was the compies again with killing Dita. And that was obviously John Hammond in the book, in the first book. So I thought it was cool that they at least tried to say, oh, what were some cool ideas from the book that we couldn't get to in the first movie? Let's chuck them in this movie. I think they work. And it was good because it was another dinosaur we didn't see in the first movie, really. Bring that into this movie. Apparently, and also just a little tidbit when I was doing my research, apparently that was one of the hardest dinosaurs they actually had doing.
I can see why. Like, there's one shot when Dita's getting attacked, played by Peter Stormare, who's a friggin' amazing actor,
Great
and
guy,
the supporting cast in this movie is incredible. Like the amount of incredible actors they got to just fill it out and make it solid. But when he's getting attacked, there's one shot where they're kind of up on him and they're on his shoulders, and you turn, and they've obviously got some animatronic ones in there because the head's moving quite believably. But if you look at the feet in a couple of frames, you can see the feet very clearly just like stuck on, and him shaking a bit too much to make it look like it's wobbling. There's a very old school Roger Corman style effects. And I was looking at it, I was like, my God, like this is in 97. This would have been so hard to create in 1997 and make look even remotely good and scary. And you watch that scene like, that's a terrifying way to die. Yeah. Just being swarmed by little dinosaurs.
Well, I think
scary.
What I think I read, you're right. Like there was definitely a good mix of animatronics, and then obviously there was the CGI version. I think from what I was reading, the CGI versions were hard to do because they were on a small scale, but actually to still have them have a bit of weight to them. Again, I don't understand all that CGI stuff, but again, apparently they're a lot more difficult to do than, obviously some of the bigger dinosaurs, which have a bit of weight to them and stuff like that. So I thought that was interesting. I was like, oh, well, yeah, fair enough. Again, I don't know all that stuff. I know CGI isn't the easiest thing at the best of times, but, especially I remember watching some screen tests for the CGI Yoda and trying to get that right. But, it was just interesting.
Well, speaking of interesting, like I think kind of one of my biggest gripes, and a lot of people's gripes with at least the first Jurassic World movie, was the over-reliance of CGI. Because what makes the original trilogy of Jurassic Park so good is that perfect blend of animatronics and CGI. I mean, Cable, I was talking to you off air just before we started recording this. I had a conversation with my fiance's mother recently about the first Jurassic Park, and she said, I just watched the first Jurassic Park for the first time in ages. Those special effects don't hold up at all. And I'm like, what's wrong with you? Like what is wrong with you? I mean, this movie would shit all over a lot of movies today. And I think kind of, with that mixture of effects, particularly, throughout this one, and even Jurassic Park 3 does a great job mixing, like the Spinosaurus and kind of other things with the CGI. You lose that in the Jurassic World one. They brought that back a little bit, of course, in Fallen Kingdom, which helped. But, the first Jurassic World lost a lot of that. And that's kind of, I think, what all connected us to these movies, wasn't it? Was that it's kind of that level of realism that kind of makes you believe that these are real creatures. And there's something about doing that in a computer that doesn't quite exactly, make it as good as it probably does with that. But, I mean, the compies the compies are great. Like, the compies are kind of like the Dilophosaurus. Like, we've seen the compies in at least we've seen them in the future ones, but they've never played a bigger role. I mean, it's kind of interesting how, I guess, that's the thing of the Jurassic Park franchise. Like, each of the movies has kind of their starring dinosaur, right? The one that you remember it from. And I mean, this is a different one. This has kind of got a whole bunch of different stars, but the compies are maybe the one that I remember the most from this one, because this is kind of the first time we got to see them. And someone who amount of times I've read the original novel, like that whole opening sequence about that family and the little girl, and that's kind of the whole thing about trying to discover like what is, because that's one big thing that was missing from the first movie. Was the whole plot line in the book was, of course, about getting dinosaurs off the island, right? So kind of different way of doing it. So I kind of like that they took that element that I love, that whole opening sequence in the book, and gave it to this movie. And as you mentioned too, sort of, what they've also done with that. The other one was the waterfall scene, was kind of like a bit of a homage to the big epic waterfall scene in the first book as well. But I one thing I have always appreciated about the sequels is that every single sequel takes some form of element or scene from the two Michael Crichton books, which, Jurassic Park 3 did that with the Aviary. Fallen Kingdom did a lot of stuff that people don't sort of realize what they did. I don't know if Jurassic World did a whole lot of the book. Maybe that's the one that kind of uses limited as mount, but I've always appreciated that from what they've done with the sequels.
Yeah, I think that a lot of the elements that they chose to put into Lost World are just right, and some of it is Spielberg just wanting to pick up bits that he talked about how he really wanted to do the T-Rex through the waterfall in part 1. He didn't wind up doing it, so he's like, oh, I'll keep that. And he talked about how he wanted to have this big epic moment between the two T-Rexes, but they only had one T-Rex in the first one, but he really had this vision of two T-Rexes coming together and doing something really crazy and surprising people one other side, the same way that the Velociraptors did, and how we got to do that. And I think all of the beats in it land. I don't think there's any part of this movie where there's a sequence where you look at it and go, I'm kind of just spinning the wheels a bit there, and threw that in to have another dinosaur or have another attack. Like, for a movie that's about dinosaurs killing people, it could so easily fall into being boring very quickly. And Spielberg got bored making it. He worried he was making a bad movie. He's sort of sitting around going, I'm just making, I think he called it a barking dog movie, where he was just making something where every scene was just an animal yelling and people screaming and running away. And obviously there was weeks and weeks and weeks when that would have been all that was on set. But again, and I think I spoke about this on the Jaws episode, that a lesser director would have made a pile of crap with Jaws, and a lesser director would have made a pile of crap with Lost World. Like, there's a lot of parts of this movie that could get away from you if you aren't Steven Spielberg, I think. And that's something that gets forgotten as well. And it's a problem when you're a brilliant director, is people stop noticing how hard what you're doing is. Like, making a film where you've got some real, quote unquote, some puppet dinosaurs, but real dinosaurs that are there on the set to interact with, and other parts where they're going to be CGI, and you've got to sit and go, okay, right, now run away from the giant puppet head that doesn't have a body, but when we see the wide will have a body, and then get scared by the tennis ball, which will actually be a velociraptor, and then go into this building which doesn't have anything inside, but then when we get back to LA, then we're going to have this. Like, there's so much that has to be going on, and all it takes is one day or 2 days of a director being like, ugh, this again. And you've got a film that has stodgy bits, or it stops, or it starts, or bits fall apart. Nothing falls apart in this movie. The whole way through, you are propelled scene to scene to scene to scene to scene. It's a relentless film. And when you get to the end, you stop and go, I wasn't bored. Nothing in there was ridiculous. The only points that you can really pull apart. Well, all right.
Don't say
I'll
the
let you
end
get
of
to that.
the
But
movie. Don't
I was
say
gonna
only
say,
parts you can.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I when I was watching it, even last night, I've seen it 20, 25 times. And watching it, I hadn't watched it for a while, watched it, and you're right. You never get bored in that movie. It's constant. Like you said, it's great pacing. There's not too many bits that you sort of sit there and, twiddle your thumbs or whatever. But you said it's ridiculous. And there's a few bits that I really, but anyway, continue.
No, look, the only thing I was going to say that you could pull apart is, if you're someone who's a big fan, you can find the inconsistencies from the first to the second one. You can find little moments from the book to the movie, like something that it's absolutely nothing wrong with it, but it pisses me off as a fan, is when Hammond is trying to get Malcolm to go to the island, and he says to him, as you famously said, life will find a way. When everyone in the fucking world knows that the line is life finds a way, not life will find a way. He didn't famously say that, you stupid whole but like stuff like that. You can be like, that's not what he said. I've seen the first movie 1,000 times. Like things like that, sure. But as a movie, even as a movie, if you hadn't seen Jurassic Park, if you never watched Jurassic Park in your life and you're at a friend's house and they were like, hey, watch this, you can watch this movie and not be lost. You can follow this movie the whole way through. Like anytime you're like, who's that? There's a scene like 10 seconds later. Like if you don't know who Hammond is, the next scene is what's Alice Howard? I was going to call him Roland, but that's not his name in the movie.
Peter Ludlow.
Peter Ludlow, thank you. There's a scene where he kind of explains enough for someone who has no idea who he is, why it's important that we know he is, why we don't need to worry about him anymore, and why I'm now the bad guy of this movie, and you move on. Like, it's a tremendous feat to take such a complex idea as dinosaurs coming back to life and having people be able to follow a movie if they've never seen the first one. But what's ridiculous? Correct me. What is it that's ridiculous that I'm forgetting or ignoring?
There's one scene that is inexcusable, but I will defend. If you're going to bag out the closing in San Diego, I'll defend that. I feel like I'm the only one in the world who defends. Everyone hates that.
I love it. I love it.
Good. All right, there's two of us, Angus. I like this.
I think there's a few little bits, and maybe I'm just being really, really picky. But
kicking raptors.
Okay, that is the furthest that they pushed my love is her flipping on the bars. But
second worst sequence ever in Jurassic Park. The Alan dinosaur and the next one's the worst.
But when I was a kid and I saw it in 1997, when I saw it, I didn't for a second think, "Oh, this is outlandish." When I watch it as an adult, there's a part of my adult brain that's like, come on now. But then I tell my adult brain, okay, well, she's running away from velociraptors. So how far do you want to go down this road?
Well, I guess that's where I have my issues. Like, it's hard to know, like, until you're actually in a situation like that and your adrenaline's pumping, and, you know, it's a bit like the cliche of the horror movie where they always run upstairs where they get trapped by the killer. I just felt like some of those scenes they set up, like, and visually, I'll tell you one of the best visuals I love. And I remember, I think it was a little bit in the trailer, the visual of them all walking into that field and then seeing the lines of the raptors start to come and then pick them off. That is still one of my favorite, like the bird's eye shot of just these lines coming through the long grass or the field.
The long grass.
I love that, but I just feel like there's certain elements in that scene when obviously Ian Malcolm and his group get to that field and guys have already been picked off, and he stands there and he does, like you said before, does his Ian Malcolm thing where he just, I think we've got to run. Like you're just running. Like, why are you pausing and looking into the camera? Like, your daughter's there. You want to run. Like, run. And
he's a trailer machine in this movie, Jeff Goldblum. Like, you literally, like, it's one of those movies where you've seen the trailer so many times. You know, like, you watch the movie, you know the trailer lines off by heart. But, like, Jeff Goldblum is on point in this movie. You know, the mummy's very angry to the, you know, this is the worst idea in the long, sad history of bad ideas. Like, there's things like that are pure.
Oh, he's so good. He is so good in it.
Right.
And then that scene, I feel like they get into that old sort of, you know, what do I call it? I guess it's the
radio tower or whatever it is.
They get there, and then obviously the raptors come in, and then they sort of, instead of running really hard or looking a little bit before, I feel like it's like a little jog here and a little jog there, and it's like they're raptors, they're going to tear you apart. Like, and I felt like in that moment, from what we knew, like you were saying about inconsistency, I feel like what we knew from the raptors in the first movie, these raptors seem like really dumb, slow raptors.
It is the dumbest the raptors are in any of the movies. You're right.
And
like,
it's
the next
like,
one,
I feel like,
talking,
and then the one
right?
raptor jumps through. There was that cool comic moment where he opens a door, but the raptor just jumps in the window, and then he goes. And I was like, the raptors, I know they play off as dummies, and then I don't like to be negative, but you're right. The gymnastics thing, I feel like, okay, cool. They established that she was cut from the gymnastics team, so that's something she can do. But then, would she have had the strength to kick out a pretty strong animal out the thing? Debatable. But then
the worst part is that she says, "Hey, you." Like, if she just literally kicked the thing out, probably not as bad. The fact that she goes, "Hey, you," it literally stops and looks at her, and then she kicks it. That's my problem with it.
Yeah, I think that whole scene, for me, there's a lot of issues. I think, again, I'm not a physicist, but I feel like the physics that they used and expected us to swallow just a bit too bullshit. Like even when Julianne Moore gets out, Sarah gets out that top of when she climbs out, all of a sudden the raptor gets up there really quickly, but we don't really see it. But then gets through a little gap that only she just got through, and then just does this big jump, and then she's holding on to this thing and she's pulling the tires. I'm like, I'm sorry, but she's been holding on to a rope in a trailer as well. I'm like, what strength has she got left anymore? Like, I'm sorry, you're really asking me to believe way too much. And like, give me the dinosaurs, but try and have a level of realism.
Sorry, I just got to jump in here. Angus, I think, summed it up perfectly. At the end of the day, you're watching a movie about people being chased by velociraptors. I mean, you're talking about a level of believability.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like, I think you can't keep stretching it. Like, okay, you're giving us this, and you've given us the science behind it. You're giving us dinosaurs, but don't take the piss and make the action scenes just too unbelievable and expect. And then that was the thing. This is what blows my mind. So the Raptors, she smartly pulls the tiles out. The Raptor falls and hits the other one. They get in a little fight, and she falls and she screams, and they keep fighting still, and they roll past her. I'm like, come on, they're ripping her to shreds.
They're definitely.
We don't know. We don't know the pack mentality of the Velociraptor and how quickly they'll turn on themselves to assert dominance. Maybe the more important thing in Velociraptor packs is dominance over eating. So that could be the.
You're right.
I guarantee that whole sequence with the gymnastics and the Hayu and the kicking, I guarantee that whole sequence is in there because as they were going through the film, Spielberg looked and said, the kid needs a win. The kid doesn't have a single win in the movie, and this movie is 4 kids. The kid needs a scene where all the kids in the audience can be like, yeah, and on the drive home, they can imagine themselves kicking a dinosaur. And what the fuck is an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old, whoever else you're going to say? They're going to say, hey, you, and pretend they're Arnie and kick it. And I think that's part of why I can forgive it, because I can see why it's there. I know what it's supposed to do. It does what it's supposed to do. If she was saving Ian every third scene, or if she, was the one to take down the T-Rex and save Peter Postlethwaite, I'd be like, all right, get the fuck in the bin. But like, I've got a lot more love for her than I do for the friggin' kids in Jurassic World.
Yes,
all the kids in Jurassic Park 3.
Thank you. Yeah, no, like absolutely agree with you. I actually like Kelly. After
Lex and Tim, Kelly's the best.
I would probably completely
the Jurassic
agree
Park
with that.
World Kids series.
Yeah, I know in the third one, like I know on the Oz Network, download now, give it a subtle plug. We covered all the movies a few years ago, and I went into the third one really not liking the kid in that one, Eric, but he kind of grew on me after talking about him. But like, Kelly, I agree with you. She's easily the second best kid in the franchise. I mean, the 2 in Jurassic World are annoying shit. Shut the fuck up. Yeah. And the fifth one, like the girl, like. Quickly skip ahead 10 seconds right now if you haven't seen it, but she's a clone. Fucking you let all the dinosaurs out, you dumb bitch. Like, you should own that problem. Like, Jesus.
Something that how we talked about the books before and now talking about Kelly, something that always confused me a little is in Lost World, there is no Kelly. There's 2 kids and they're not Malcolm's kids from memory. They're just random.
But there is one called Kelly though. Kelly and Arby.
Yeah, there's a point, and they kind of amalgamated their characters into this one thing. I had a quick look. I did a cursory search yesterday, and I couldn't find why. Why do that? Is it because they were too similar to Lex and Tim, and he didn't want to retread it? Is it because having 2 kids can be just annoying, and having one you can very easily go hide in the car, and then you don't need her for the next scene, and that's great?
From memory of the book, they were annoying though. Like that Arby kid, wasn't he like some like geeky kid with like a Ventolin pump and glasses? Like he was just the geeky nerdy.
And the Kelly character in that one is obsessed with Sarah. I remember there's a scene where Sarah comes in from the trailer and she's having a shower. She's like, hand me some shampoo. And the girl's like, oh, there's no shampoo. She's like, what is there? She's like, there's dishwashing liquid. And she's like, same thing, give me that. And there's like 2 pages on the girl being enamored with the fact that Sarah uses dishwashing liquid to wash her hair and what a badass she is. And I remember watching that being like, really? That's reading it being like, that's the thing that gets you? All right, cool, whatever, man.
Yeah. I think, I mean, for ease of explaining how she gets to the island, I mean, you can only really have the one kid, really. No? Yeah.
Well, I think they've got this. I think it was the same though in the book, though, wasn't it?
I think they stole it.
Stuck on the train.
Not meant to be there.
It was exactly the same. But like, I think the thing that I like about Kelly is I like the fact that they bring her in as Malcolm's daughter. Like, I like that because obviously in the first one, they talk about how I'm always on the lookout for an ex Mrs. Malcolm, and I love kids. I've got 3 of them, and I kind of like that connection. And I mean, a lot of people complain because they're like, oh, like, how is she his daughter? And there's even the line in the movie, like, I'm not seeing any family resemblance here. And there's theories out there that she's actually adopted, or
Yeah.
that Malcolm
Or
married
he,
into
one of his
another
exes is
relationship.
black. Like, who cares?
Yeah,
One of the
like,
things I
don't
like
get why
about
that's
it
a thing. Yeah.
is that it is kind of colorblind casting. Like in 1997, Steven Spielberg was like, "Yeah, Malcolm's got a black daughter. Who gives a
Yeah.
shit? Let's just do it. Who cares? It doesn't."
I
Considering
think
we
from-
just had the first Jurassic Park movie where every black character in that movie dies, right?
I think they did want to. I think they did want to explain it that she was adopted or whatever, because they thought, well, people are going to ask. Go, hang on, Ian's white, predominantly fairly white, and we've obviously got a very black daughter. That how do you explain that? And they were trying to fiddle around with a line, just a throwaway line to say that hint that she was adopted, but then they just like, oh, don't worry about it.
At the end of the day, it doesn't matter though. Like, what does it matter? Like,
What it
I
actually
always
does
just-
do,
yeah,
I
is
just
it
assumed she was a
creates.
stepdaughter or an adopted child, so I never really worried about it too much.
I just always assumed that his ex-wife was black.
Yeah, me
like
too.
I never even thought it wasn't his
never
genetic
even
daughter.
clicked. Yeah, I agree.
But I think something it does do is like they have that brief little argument about how he's never around and how the mum dropped her on the doorstep and went to Paris. But what it does, and again, this is Spielberg being great as a visual storyteller, it gives you a really clear indication that these two are disconnected on every level and really struggle to meet, like down to a racial level where he can't comprehend what it's like to be her in any way, and she can't comprehend what it's like to be him. And that battled relationship, you've got to care about your characters in a movie of giant dinosaurs. When you forget the characters, that's when you get piece of crap movies that go straight to DVD. We're like, yeah, it's monsters eating people. Like, I care about Ian Malcolm's daughter because I care about Ian Malcolm. I love him so much from the first movie. I care about his family, even if I don't know them. And the same as like when he finds out that his girlfriend is there, I don't need to know anything else about Sarah other than that Ian Malcolm loves her. That's my in. And so you've got these characters that have this complex relationship. It's covered in a few lines, or in the case of his daughter, just a shot of the two of them together. You know what you need to know. And for the rest of the movie, when they're in peril, you're invested because that's Ian Malcolm's family.
And yeah, I agree with that. And one thing that really annoys me about this movie when on the topic of Malcolm is that a lot of criticism people say about this movie is that Malcolm's not the same character. He's not who he was in the first movie. And I call complete bullshit in that, because Malcolm's only quirky Jeff Goldblum Malcolm in the first half of Jurassic Park until he gets crushed and nearly dies. And then in the second half of that movie, he's cynical Jeff Goldblum Malcolm. And even when he's bubbly, flirtatious, Jeff Goldblum, like he's still a bit cynical. As you said before, Angus, he's literally the one going, life finds a way. Like, he's kind of calling bullshit on this whole operation, isn't he? So it's not like, he's not doing it before. And I think if you actually listen to the dialogue at the beginning and kind of the shit that clearly Jeff has gone through, Malcolm's gone through, in between the first one. And again, in the novel, he's been completely discredited. He's basically gone against confidentiality agreements and gone, screw you, InGen, I'm going to speak out about this. And no one's believed him. So of course he's going to be a little bit more, the way he is in this movie and kind of so negative and a bit down. And it just annoys me that people can't see a character development from one movie to the other, that they think he's going to be life of the party Jeff Goldblum. Of course he's going to be like this.
But also on that, like, yes, he went through this traumatic event and he's been discredited and everything has fallen apart in his life essentially. But in the first movie, he is a chaostician being paid a ridiculous amount of money to go to a theme park to see dinosaurs and crack onto Laura Dern. In the second movie, he is fearful for his girlfriend and daughter's life.
Yeah.
I do not care who you are. If your child is in peril, you're not hanging out cracking one-liners. You're fucking eyes on the prize. Like, everything about his character from 1 to 2 makes sense, because in the second one, he has stakes.
Exactly.
He's got skin in the game.
Yep.
The only person he
Completely
really
agree.
has to worry about in 1 is him. In the second one, the last person he's worried about is him.
And
Doesn't-
that's
Brilliant.
I agree. And like Alan Grant, kind of like, I mean, you want to bring these characters back with a sequel. Of course you do. You get a Lex and Tim cameo, you get, Hammond back. But like, I think Malcolm's the perfect guy to bring back for the sequel, because like, what's Alan going to do? Like Alan is what he is in the third one. I mean, you saw the development of him. He's kind of like Malcolm again, isn't he? Like, he's changed his opinion. He's different. And Ellie's not going to hold a movie at that point either. So I think Malcolm, out of the main guys in that movie, is the guy you bring back. It makes most sense.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's funny just even talking about this now, because it's reminding me exactly of our podcast last week, Jaws 2, where Brody was suffering PTSD and having a situation again. Of course, the character is going to change a little bit. And like in that movie, his kids are in peril and he has to, take a stand and actually get involved when he didn't want to. And same with Ian Malcolm, had no reason to go to that island. And obviously the hook was the girlfriend was there.
Yeah.
And that gets obviously amplified when the daughter's the stowaway. But you're right. I mean, how can he be the same Ian Malcolm from one movie to the next? You can't.
It's just frustrating. Like the criticism that it gets because of that, like it's kind of like, I guess we live in this world now where Jeff Goldblum's this great sort of cult figure and fantastic. We all love Jeff Goldblum, but it's sort of, it ruins it. Like, I think Angus, you were talking a little bit off air about how kind of this has ruined almost Jeff Goldblum, the actor, because I mean, he's an amazing actor. And we kind of lose that into this cult of personality that the larger than life Jeff Goldblum brings. And like, again, we were talking a bit about Independence Day before and how kind of the sequel is just all pure Jeff Goldblum. The small cameo that Goldblum has in Fallen Kingdom, I mean, he's in it for what, 2 minutes? He's just delivering a speech at the beginning and then the narration at the end. Like, I capture more of the character of Ian Malcolm in that brief thing than the entire Independence Day resurgence, what they did with David, and that was not the same character. Like, I believe that was Ian Malcolm, not Jeff Goldblum. And that's the problem you have now with a Jeff Goldblum film. Are you watching Jeff Goldblum or are you watching the character he's playing? And I'm hoping this will happen in Dominion, that they keep that up and that he's still going to be Ian Malcolm in the 6th film.
And I hate to be the negative one, but you guys are being super positive, so it's okay. One of the other scenes that or ideas that Spielberg kept from the Crichton book was the trailer scene and the cliff. And while I do like a lot of the aspects of, you know, the parents, the obviously the adult T-Rex coming for their baby and all that, and some of that stuff, again, the expectations on me to believe that they could all sort of survive that sort of fall or be hanging from that rope in the wet. And then the actual it falling over and them still somehow survive. For me, I don't know. I still want a slice of realism. You give me the dinosaurs, I'll let you have that, but you still got to give me some sort of. And for me, I think that was just way too much for me, and I really struggle through that scene when I have to watch it because it's exciting. I get it, and they raise the stakes, and then she falls on the glass, and then there's the bag, and there's something else hanging off. But for me, it's just like, come on, just too much.
Wow.
Cable,
too much of a
that
leap.
is my favorite scene in the movie.
Yeah, I was going to say
my
that's
favorite scene in the entire Velocity.
Yeah.
I love
was
it so
sitting in
much for all the
silence.
reasons, the opposite reasons, I think, to what you're saying.
Yeah.
Like
Really.
like Jeff Goldblum, mum, he's very angry. Love it. Eat it up. Num, 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 num. One T-Rex coming down. Oh, shit. He turns around. Another T-Rex. Oh, fuck, man. There's another T-Rex.
No. So,
and then there's all this stuff. And then, but all of the stuff in the van, when it hangs off the cliff, the tension in that, like that is a beautifully executed action sequence, in my opinion, because the whole time, again, when I watched this movie for the first time in 97, I didn't know who Julianne Moore was. No one knew who Vince Vaughn was. Those are disposable characters at that point. They could die. Ian Malcolm's not dying, but they could. Probably Nick, I thought, was going to go when I watched that movie. Like, he's definitely going to go in this. So I was tense. I was like, I don't want him to die. He's the cool guy. And it's all swinging. Everything's gone. And then, of course, I cannot remember his character's name.
Eddie. I called him Toby from the West
Eddie
Wing.
Carr.
But,
Eddie.
Yeah.
And then
Richard
Eddie,
Schiff.
of course, is the disposable one in that. But even that, like him, like trying to keep the accelerator on when the T-Rex is coming in,
I
he's
love
getting
that
lower,
bit.
and
I love
him
that
trying to get the gun, and then he dies, and the absolute devastation of watching that character die, because he's a pure innocent character. Everything about him is great. He's just there to help everyone down to his dying breath, and then watching him die, and then the van falling over. I love it. I love watching that van go over them, and I buy it. I'm like, yeah, all the windows are smashed out. Dumb luck, of course. But man, give it to me. Give me all of it. And then the explosion when it lands for some reason, because vans have got to explode in the 90s when they hit rocks to carry over from the 80s.
And the tire has to blow up all the way.
See, I agree completely.
You've got to get it all.
Yeah. It's
Okay.
to me,
It blew my mind the first time I saw it. It blew my mind today when I rewatched it again on my laptop, ignoring my children just to watch that scene again. Like, my son fell over and I was like, give me a minute. And I just went to watch that scene again because I really, really love it.
Wow, geez, I must be...
It's
I
one of
must
the
be
best
the
scenes in
negative
all
one.
of Jurassic Park, Cable. What's wrong with you?
No, I guess the thing that just it's just more that everything else in it I don't mind. I actually really like I said, the part with Eddie trying to put the accelerator on it, skidding and all that, and obviously the T-Rex coming back. I just think three of them on the rope and then the trailer coming over. I just like, for me, that's just a little bit too much.
The thing that I think the best bit
Have
about
you
that
held
whole
on? Have you held on to a rope recently?
I've never held
In
on
the
to a
way-
rope in my life, Cable. You've met me. You've
I
seen
don't know.
me.
I don't know. I feel like there's certain dynamics with certain people in certain movies.
Look, I
just like,
totally,
I just don't see
totally
that.
get what you're saying. Like, I really do. Like, I'm generally with you in terms of I like something to be a bit realistic, even though you are watching genetically modified dinosaurs attack people.
Mm.
But like, there's definitely an element to. But like, I I just can't be in that mindset with this scene because like just everything about this sequence is just incredible. I mean, that bit where she's on the glass and it's
Oh.
cracking underneath her, and you've got this phone slipping, it's slipping. Like it's just that is so brilliant. And I think anybody who's seen this film, whether they like it or not, no one criticizes this scene except for Cable, apparently. like I've seen the harshest critics of this movie say, okay, no, this sequence is fucking fantastic. And like one thing I'll just quickly add now, because I don't know if you're going to bring it up, Cable, but like the score in this movie, I might even say is better than the original. Like it is so good, and it just like the score in this scene is insanely brilliant. What are you smoking, my friend?
My favorite quote about the music is Steven Spielberg and John Williams got together and like the music needs to be a bit different. We're in the jungle this time. We'll add bongos, and that was their big move. Is they added bongos. He also wrote an incredible score, but I found that really funny.
Yeah, well, again, we talked about Jaws 2 last week, and John Williams came back and did that, and had his still familiar parts in there, but added new stuff, and you and me both rated, obviously. And again, this score was another one. He came back, he had to change it up a little bit because we weren't in the park anymore, and different characters and in different, I guess, scenarios. I probably didn't have my ear open to a lot of it, to be totally honest, when I watched it last night, but definitely it's still a good soundtrack.
I've got Jurassic Park soundtrack is like the soundtrack I probably listened to most of my life, but this one's up there, like just that dun 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 dun, dun like just the way it kind of that, and it really, like you mentioned those bongos, Angus, but like just the feel of this score, like you legitimately feel like you are in a jungle somewhere, like you actually like legitimately feel you were there, and
feel muggy.
Yeah,
somehow manages to capture the weather.
It's incredible.
And the moment when they get into the broken down, dilapidated center, whatever it was called, and Nick opens the door and he sees the sign that says Jurassic Park, and you hear just that little, just the faintest little background, and chills every time I hear it. I'm like, oh, there it is.
And you don't hear like the full suite until the end when you've got like that whole life suite thing. The thing too, like as well, like you mentioned like Julianne Moore, Vince Vaughn, like, you know, people are all excited for the return of Jeff Goldblum, Sam Neill, Laura Dern for Dominion. I'm with you. I'm very excited. It's great. But like, I'm one of these rare people, I feel, that I'm hanging on to a Julianne Moore or a Vince Vaughn return in.
Yes.
Like it's incredible to think like Julianne Moore, an Academy Award winner now. Vince Vaughn, like, I mean, kind of, we all know him now as a comedic actor, but this was in a period where you had Vince Vaughn in, like, Owen Wilson was in serious movies in the late 90s. Like, people don't remember this weird time when we had these funny actors.
I found Vince Vaughn in serious movies. I watched him in a movie called The Locust, and I was like, oh, this guy's a full-on dramatic actor. And then a few years later, he was in the Psycho remake. Yeah. Well, he wound up in this movie because of Jaws. I don't know if you guys probably know this because you know a lot about this movie, but he was in Swingers. Him and Jon Favreau made Swingers together, and they used the Jaws theme in Swingers, and it had to get approved. So Steven Spielberg saw an advanced screening to hear and approve whether or not it could be in the movie, and he saw Vince Vaughn in the movie and was like, that guy's cool. I like that guy. He can be in my movie. And that's how he wound up being Nick in The Lost World, is because of the Jaws theme and Swingers back when he was a nobody. And in this movie, I forgot, honestly, about Vince Vaughn in this movie. I knew he was in it and I knew I liked him, but I forgot how much I liked him and how good he is in this film.
In all fairness as well, Angus, I think Steven Spielberg forgot about him too, because he does just disappear in the third act of this movie.
Yeah, he does.
No explanation. Like, he literally disappears.
It's very frustrating.
But it is a great cast. Like you mentioned Pete Postlethwaite before in this movie, Peter Stormare, like just, even Alice Howard. Like, I actually really like the character of Ludlow. Like he's one of these weird villains that I think if you really analyze what he's doing, he's actually really not that bad. Like, he's actually, like, what he's doing is kind of fair point. Like, he's just the CEO of a company. He's just trying to keep his business alive. Like, what's the problem in that? Whole
I
different
like that he's
episode.
drunk the whole time too.
Yeah.
And they never reference it other than the flask, but just like when he's given the presentation on the island and he's just smashed.
He's got
And
some
there's
funny
no
lines
reference.
too.
As you see, that we'll be ready to open inside of a month. It's like, you're presenting to investors. What are you doing, champ?
And what's he
I
say?
keep-
Like San Diego home of animals. We've got the Sea World, and we've got the zoo and the San Diego Chargers. And he just like waiting for like boom. But I always love that bit where it's like, "Are you okay, Mr. Ludlow?" When the boat crashes into the thing, he's like, "I don't know. How do I look?" Like,
that
he's
character also
great.
was initially meant to be Gary Oldman, and he had to pull out because of scheduling
Oh,
issues. And I
jeez.
was thinking like, God, it'd be good if Gary Oldman did it, but no,
That
I
would have been
think it's great as
amazing.
is.
No, it
What
is.
I
Like, I
also find
agree.
interesting,
Yeah.
Pete Postlethwaite, after Pete Postlethwaite died, Steven Spielberg gave an interview and said that Pete Postlethwaite is the best actor he's ever worked with in his entire career, which I thought was
Wow.
a huge call because he's worked with everyone. He's worked with Jeff Goldblum, he's worked with
Sean
Robert
Connery.
Shaw, he's worked with Sean Connery, Tom Hanks,
Liam
Tom Hanks,
Harrison Ford.
the Warner Brothers and the Warner
Leonardo
sister Dot.
DiCaprio. Yeah, geez, so many
Tom
people.
Cruise, Tom Hanks, Dustin
Meryl
Hoffman,
Streep.
Robin Williams. Not a lot of women on the list other than Robin Williams, Meryl Streep and Julia Roberts, because
Wow.
it turns out in 55 films, he doesn't really cast women much other than The Color Purple.
No.
A lot of dude movies. I didn't realize that until I was looking through his filmography. I was like, oh,
Wow.
all of your female characters are the wives and girlfriends, Stephen. You might want to sort that out, champ. But yeah, Pete Postlethwaite is an astounding. Like when he shows up in this movie, he takes it over.
Oh yeah.
The first scene that he's in when they're like on the trucks, like like I said before, it's a different movie, but now it's his movie. And every time he's on screen for the rest of this movie, he somehow manages to just obliterate the other three characters that we've had an entire act of the film to get to know and love, and also in Jeff Goldblum's place, in a whole film to fall in love with.
Completely.
But it doesn't matter when he's also kind of the bad guy, but not really. He's just a bit morally in a gray area, and ultimately he wants to look after people. He just also wants to kill a T-Rex, and he's there to do this fantasy he has. But he wipes everyone off the screen. It's phenomenal how good he is as a supporting small role character that could have easily just been forgotten.
And it's interesting too. I just want to really quickly give another nod to Julianne Moore, because I mean, like the character of Sarah is a little bit, all over the place. She's a bit annoying at times, but she's also pretty good. But I think kind of she's like so forgotten in the Jurassic World franchise because it's like we all love Laura Dern, another Academy Award winner now. I mean, looking good for Bryce Dallas Howard. She's going to win one day, but I mean, like
Ron will make sure.
Yes, exactly. Like I like Bryce Dallas Howard. Don't get me wrong; her character's a little bit annoying, but I mean, it's a different.
She's excellent when you can't get Jessica Chastain.
Yeah, exactly. Like she works so well with Chris Pratt. Like the chemistry those two have are fantastic. So like it's kind of their different characters, right? But I mean, okay, there's not the greatest amount of females in this franchise, but I mean, if you have to choose outside of Laura Dern, you've got Tia Leone and Julianne Moore. I love Tia Leone as an actress, but her character's a pain in the ass in Jurassic Park 3. So
it's a
I'm going to
nothing
go
role.
with Julianne Moore. So
yeah, God
Anyone
bless her
who's married to
divorce.
David
That's the
Duchovny
only.
all right in my book, but just not in Jurassic Park 3.
Julianne Moore did this movie because she had to pay off a divorce.
Yeah.
And her agent was like, "Don't you want to work with Spielberg?" She's like, "Yeah, I do. All right." And that's
Well,
how she went up in Lost World.
She said in a recent interview, actually, they did one fairly recently, and somebody brought up like, "Oh, would you be open to return?" And she's like, "Well, if I was asked, I probably would come back as Sarah Harding." So people are like, "Oh, is she in Dominion?" And I tell you one thing, like we all know the original three are going to be in it, so it's not going to be a surprise. But if I watched Dominion and fucking Sarah Harding rocks up and Vince Vaughn shows up, like I'm going to be shitting bricks. I'm going to be thrilled. So
Yeah, I'd
bring
love it if Sarah Harding and Nick rock up and they're a couple now, and then Ian has to deal with that and dinosaurs. I want to watch Jeff
exactly.
Goldblum do that scene. That would be great.
Yeah, because and then you've got Alan has lost Ellie in Jurassic Park 3, right? So
there's going to be a lot of sexual tension in this movie.
Yeah, bloody hell.
It's going to be the best thing about
Alan
Dominion.
and Malcolm are going to end up together. It's 2022 by that stage. It's very modern and progressive. Why not?
That would be such a brilliant end to the series.
Yeah.
And as they walk off holding hand in hand, Alan just leans and kisses him on the cheek and says, "Life does find a way." That would be the greatest conclusion to a film series ever.
And in the background,
and up to birds flying. Be great.
I'm going to be a bit negative here as well when you talk about Sarah Harding. No, I actually like Julianne Moore as an actress, and a lot of the stuff she's done I've always rated, but I don't know what it was this time watching it. Maybe I was looking at her a lot more, but I felt like her character I don't know. I just feel like from what we know about her going into the movie, her background, and she's dealt with African animals and this, that. I felt like she screamed a lot when she shouldn't. She should know not to be doing that. I felt like that wouldn't be her character. That was the thing that only annoyed me a bit. Like I know, oh wow, the T-Rex is just roared right next to your face or whatever, but I just feel like what we know from her character, what Hammond tells us, and what we sort of little bits we get, she's a smart woman and she's had these experiences before. So I'm thinking she panics a lot in this movie for a character that shouldn't be panicking as much. And that was the only thing that annoyed me. And it's not Julianne Moore's fault. That's probably Spielberg's direction or whatever. But I felt like her character was like you're saying, Ben, a little bit. That's where I kind of irked me. It felt like she was at moments in control, and then other times it was just like a lot of screaming, and I was like, I don't feel like that's her character. But yeah, maybe that's me again. Maybe I'm over analyzing it. But
Well, I'll
feel
counterpoint that.
Yeah, tell me.
With something that I do like about her character, because what I think Sarah Harding represents in this movie is what happens when everything you know is wrong. Like you say, she's been in all these situations. I think that's the point. Like she's been with African lions and she's been in all of these places where predators are hunting her and she has to sleep downwind and all the little clues we get. But what happens when a lifetime of information about predators is useless and you're thrown in a situation where you're meant to be completely in control and you realize very quickly, oh my God, I know less than nothing. And everything that I know about animals doesn't apply here because these are not the big cats that I've dealt with or the other predators I've dealt with. These are friggin' dinosaurs. And how quickly do we watch a character who's like when she's there on her own for 3 days and then we see her, standing by herself, photographing the Stegosaurus and not a care in the world. She's been on this island for 3 days, no worries. Then she comes face to face with a T-Rex and velociraptors and her attitude changes because what does she know about them in real life? Nothing. She knows that, I predict that they're good mothers, but then she sees what that means in reality.
Yeah.
When she's between her and I think what she does do really well as an actor is represent like, oh yeah, I don't know dick. I'm not going to try and pretend like I know how to handle this situation. I'm immediately going to shit my pants and scream. And I found that very relatable. And that's what I liked about it. I could see how it would be annoying when she's meant to be an expert.
No,
but
like
I love that.
You make an excellent point too. Like I can see that side of the coin too. I just felt like there was times where you're right. A lot of what your knowledge is goes out the window because these are animals you've never dealt with before. But I just felt like, I kind of expected the kid to scream more, and for her to be a bit more of the solid rock in the group to sort of, still be scared shitless, but maybe be a little bit more.
I would have liked her to be tougher than Nick. I would have liked that. Like he's a photographer.
Yeah.
Greenpeace photographer. Come on.
Well, you're right. Actually, that would have been a better option where she's
that would definitely, I think, is a missed opportunity.
And he's like screaming like Flanders.
She should have saved Nick's ass a few times instead of Nick immediately taking over the army in that great scene.
Oh yeah,
it's like, right, let's go, let's get up, let's get moving on your feet, and then Nick just stands up. He's like, let's go, and everyone does. I'm like, all right, yeah, cool, I get it, but maybe Julianne Moore could have had that line. What do you reckon, Steve?
Yeah. Look, I'm being nitpicky, but I mean, overall, it's it is what it is. I agree with what you said earlier, though. I think the supporting cast was really good. They got some really good actors to be involved, but I still think maybe the writing is a bit weak for some of the people. I feel like,
I definitely think like you have nowhere near as much character interest because, like I said earlier, like a lot of them are just there for fodder. Peter Stormare is an amazing actor, but he's in that movie, so you look at his face and instantly hate him because he has that kind of face, and then you feel a bit good when he gets eaten later on in the movie. Like that's his whole purpose. When we know Dieter's the second in command, we know he's a bit sad when he gets told he's never going to be second in command again. We literally don't need anything else, including a surname, to care about him. We just want to see him get eaten. So I do think that is I think that's a victim of going bigger. There's only so many hours you can ask people to sit in this movie. And if you want to have more dinosaurs doing dinosaur shit, you got to have less people saying stuff. So you care less about the people when they get eaten. But I think it's, with the few exceptions, I think every character who does actually have a name gets to really shine, even if it's just for small moments.
More so than any of the other sequels, I would argue. I mean, what do we learn about William H. Macy and Tia Leone in the next movie? They broke up and they have a paint tile place and they lost a kid. Okay, cool. The fourth one, Chris Pratt trains raptors, and Bryce Dallas Howard is in a dress and
Was he in
uptight.
the Navy? Was that his backstory? I can never quite get it.
Like, we can't even remember.
And I
Like,
can
it's
never
Chris
quite
Pratt.
remember how that applies. Oh, yeah, I was in the Navy and that trained me to become a dinosaur. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah. Like it definitely doesn't have the level of development as the first film, of course not. But I mean, I still think that the ones we're meant to care about, we know more, and we can kind of like, we know we're meant to hate Ludlow, because he's the snooty nephew of Hammond who's taken this dream away, But and as you were saying before, Angus, like, with Malcolm, we care now that he's got a kid and a girlfriend, like, and we get enough from Sarah to know, and it's like, it's an interesting point to raise, Cable, but like, it's like valid what you're saying about, like, she should be braver and stuff like that, but we know that because we've learned that about her, right? So, and even with Nick, like, he's a Greenpeace guy, a photographer, he's the guy who wants to save the dinosaurs. He's the guy who's going to take the bullets from Roland's gun, basically, because, he doesn't want him to kill this, predator, basically, because he has that line, doesn't he, of like, animals back on the planet for 5 minutes and the first thing you want to do is kill it. Like,
Yeah.
kind of, like, we've got to have that type of person. I honestly would argue that Nick is the fucking villain of this movie. Nick screws everything up. Like, without Nick, they're fine on that island.
Yeah, he lets the dinosaurs out. He takes the bullets out of the gun.
Yeah.
I'm honestly surprised. Rewatching it this time, I'm surprised at like the way this movie's structured that Nick lives.
Yeah.
Like, he's perfectly set
But
up
we
to
don't
die.
know, do we? He just disappears.
Because we love him enough that we'd care if he died, but not enough we'd be like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Like, if they ate Malcolm, I'd be like, no, I'm sorry, you have to remake that movie. You've made a huge mistake. But if they eat Nick, it's like, I liked him. All right, what happens next? Like, it's really weird.
Like saying, like,
he's done.
Where I probably would have forgave the trailer scene on the cliff is maybe if Nick dies in that scene, but he sort of dies saving the other two. For me, that would have given a little bit more. Like, I just felt like seeing the three of them balancing on the rope at the end. I was like, oh, really?
It's random that they kill Eddie off. Like, Eddie's maybe Eddie and the nanny in Jurassic World, I feel, are the two characters in the Jurassic Park franchise who just get randomly killed for randomness sake. They like, generally somebody gets killed, there's a reason behind it, right? Like, they're a sacrifice or they're a dick. But like,
Eddie is a sacrifice. Like, it's a noble death. He dies trying to save the other ones. He could have ran and saved himself, and they would have died.
The first one, isn't it? Right? Like, Muldoon kind of dies.
Yeah.
Distracting for Ellie, but like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I always just feel like it's odd. Like, I mean, maybe not as odd as the nanny. I mean, the nanny dies such a cruel fucking death in Jurassic World. Like, I mean, she really wasn't that bad.
It's pretty brutal.
Like, that is such a harsh death for a poor woman who was just doing the best she could. Colin Trevorrow hates women, I think. Like, you will get tortured.
Just picking up where Steven Spielberg left off. Like, they don't matter? Okay, cool. No worries, champ. Gotcha.
Yeah.
So the other big, I guess, difference was they did shoot some stuff in Hawaii, like the first movie, but generally most of it was shot in California.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, some of it was shot in the same forest as Endor. In San
it was
Diego.
very. Yeah, well, is it the same forest?
Yeah, some scenes, not all of it.
Yeah.
Some of it,
Yeah.
what is the
'Cause you
red
can-
something forest?
You can definitely tell there's parts where when they're walking, like you said, that scene before when Nick gets up and, okay, come on, guys, let's go. That area definitely, and those sort of scenes definitely does give you Endor vibes. I remember as a kid, though, like when you sort of started getting information about this movie, there was a big push and they really wanted to shoot in New Zealand. So for a long time, it was going, like, Spielberg did a bit of a search, and for a long time, it was locked into New Zealand for and I thought for God knows how long it was going to be New Zealand. Then it wasn't until late that you hear, oh no, they're going to go California because the cost of New Zealand was still going to be too much. Obviously sending everyone down there, but which is weird because
they were too distracted by the sheep. They just kept eating all the sheep. So, they just couldn't.
It's interesting because I would have thought that the American dollar still back then would have done all right in New Zealand. So, but yeah, it's interesting why they would go to New Zealand. But I did read somewhere that they did do a lot of audio of Costa Rica to use across, obviously on the soundtrack to give it that more Costa Rican feel, but obviously not filmed there. And then
it's not as tropical, like it's kind of that redwood sort of vibe of the forest area, which I really like, and kind of it I think people forget that in the third one it's on the same island. I think a lot of people think that the third one's back on Isla Nubla, but it's not. And but it's completely different ends of the island. Kind of, you've got the tropical feel of the third one, and you've kind of got this more foresty kind of feel to the second one. But I mean, visually, this film looks fantastic. I kind of like that scene where all the InGen guys are in the cars and they're chasing all the dinosaurs in the open plains. Like, that's such a cool sequence, and like just the way that's shot, and when sort of Malcolm and everyone are on the cliff, seeing the helicopters fly over, and they've got that sweeping shot of the cliff. Like, it's very unique kind of feel to this movie, the locations that they use, and then even just freaking using San Diego at the end, kind of like, they could have gone with New York or Los Angeles. Like, San Diego is not a city that you often see kind of used as a scene to just be destroyed somewhat. So it's kind of, they use unique things in this movie, which I think work.
I guess before I put it over to Angus, but I feel like this movie, I will give it credit for that. I think visually looks better than Jurassic Park. I think there's definitely some great stuff in Jurassic Park, but I feel like I like looking at this movie a lot more. I feel like they play with the light a lot more. There's a lot more. I mean, there's night scenes in both movies, but this seems to be a lot darker and in tone as well, but visually a little bit darker. But I don't know what it is. I feel like visually I like this movie a lot more than the first, and that could also come down to the dinosaurs and the visuals there as well. But like I was saying, like that raptor scene in the field and a few of those other bits and pieces around that, even though I don't necessarily love the mechanics, I like the visual of it. Angus?
I think visually it's pretty spectacular. It's Janusz Kaminski is a cinematographer on this, who has become like Spielberg's guy. Like, he's been the cinematographer on not every, but just about, like, War Horse, Schindler's List, Saving Private Ryan, Minority Report. What else did he did? The Posts, BFG, Bridge of Spies. Like, it goes on and on. He's come back a lot to work with Spielberg. So obviously they have a very good relationship. I think though that it does benefit from, like I said early on, not being the thriller that Jurassic Park is. Like, Jurassic Park has to be dark and brooding, and there has to be lots of shadowy shots and dark shots where you're not quite seeing everything, and you sort of feel like you're trapped a bit, so you get in the same zone as the character. And Dean Cundy was the cinematographer on Jurassic Park, and I think he did an insanely good job.
But I'm glad you brought that up, because he was supposed to come back, but I think he was tied up on some other projects.
It would have been interesting to see the difference, because what I think Zemeckis brings to this one is he understands it's a bigger, wider world. We're not playing it the same way. We're not playing the dinosaurs for jump scares or for frights anymore. We're playing them as like characters in the movie who are going to be seen a lot in full light for a lot of the time, in wide open plains a lot of the time. There's very few shots in the original where you're going to have lots of the dinosaurs out in the wide open plains for long periods of time. You get a little bit with Gallimimus and the brachiosaurs at the beginning, but it's a rarity. It's the exception opposed to the rule. Whereas in this one, it's, just about every time you see a dinosaur, you can see all of the friggin' dinosaur, even in nighttime when the velociraptors are jumping out at you. You're seeing the whole thing. So I think it does have that visual look. I couldn't tell you which one I like the look of better. I think I love them both for different reasons, and I think both cinematographers nail each film's tone perfectly. And I think that had Cundy done Lost World, you would have got a very different vibe. I don't know if they've been better or worse or the same. I have no idea, but I do think the way it's played out, both of those cinematographers have photographed these movies perfectly for these movies, and I love looking at both of them, and could just happily sit down and watch either of them with the sound off and just look at the pictures. Like, it's so beautiful. And again, they're friggin' dinosaurs, man. Like, they don't exist. They don't exist in any way, shape, or form. And yet when I watch that movie, I forget that. I'm like, there's a fucking T-Rex. Look at him go. That's pretty cool. Look at there's a velociraptor jumping around. Like, you're in it. And the amount of work and effort technically that had to go on by the people holding the cameras and lights to make it so that when we get into the cinema, we go, yes, dinosaur is just gobsmacking. And then on top of that, to also make the trees and the people and the sky and the ocean look beautiful as well. Like, who has time to make trees look good when you're trying to figure out how to film dinosaurs that aren't real? And yet you look at any scene when they're walking the jungle, zero dinosaurs. I want to go on holiday there. The trees look so good. It's like a tourism ad. It's beautiful. So good. Yeah. I can't speak highly enough of either cinematographers for either of these movies. They just look great.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about what visually you like, because I think, Jurassic Park definitely holds up brilliantly to this day. But the one thing you will say, that there are definitely a few where you kind of go, okay, like the initial Brachiosaurus, like definitely there are bits of it you're like, okay, like you can tell it's a little bit dated. Like the Gallimimus, as you're talking about, things like that. Like there are little minute ones that kind of do look a little bit hammy. Whereas I think kind of I can't think of any direct sequence. Even when you were talking before about the compies and kind of, shaking it a little bit too much when it stuck to him, it's not something that's glaringly obvious unless you're
Oh
looking
no,
for
it's a rewatch thing. It's a rewatch
Yeah.
on Blu-ray on a high def television when you've got the opportunity to pause it whenever you want. That's when you pick
Yeah.
that stuff off. That's not
And
his
I
fault.
I can't think of any sequence, and like I could probably easily nitpick any out of the next three movies out of the Jurassic. So this maybe might be the most complete when it comes to visually. So that's a good point you make, Cable. It could be it. I mean, looking at this in terms of it got nominated for best visual effects at the Oscars. Obviously, like everything that year, lost to Titanic. So wasn't really
Robbed.
wasn't
Actually,
with a chance.
What Oscar did it win? Did it win?
I don't think it did win one. I think it only
Didn't
got
win a
nominated.
sound one or anything. It feels like it should have won
Jurassic
like
Park did. Jurassic Park won
Jurassic Park got that.
sound mixing as well as visual effects. I think this is the only Oscar it got nominated for. Lost World, and it didn't win.
Okay.
Starship Troopers also nominated that year. Underrated movie, good movie. That movie.
I genuinely think that The Lost World deserves the special effects or visual effects Oscar over Titanic. Titanic, they sank a boat. I believed there was dinosaurs. Which one is harder? Like at the end of the day, go out and sink a boat. Who cares?
It's a good call.
It looks just like the real Titanic. No, I saw a real T-Rex. I saw
I'm
Velociraptors.
an adamant defender of the movie Titanic, Angus, so I'm hard pressed on that one. But
I like the movie Titanic. I'm just saying, if you're talking about achievement in visual effects or special effects, achievement being the key word, what is harder to do?
Well, I feel like it's the next year, 2 years later, The Matrix beats Star Wars Episode 1, Phantom Menace. Now, there's merits on both sides there for those films. That's a whole other different episode.
No,
Sorry,
I'm fine with that. I
don't
believe
know.
The
I feel
Matrix
there's
more
more
than
to it
Jar
with
Jar
Titanic
Binks.
that you're forgetting. But anyway, the point is, I think visually, yeah, this movie is just beautiful.
It's rock solid.
Yeah, there's nothing that
the two scenes where they kind of repeat themselves, but I don't notice that much. I don't care. Where early on in the film, I forget the name, the dome-headed dinosaur, where it's chasing the guys around, and it smashes
Elvis. No. The Pompadour
smashes
Elvis.
the guy through the car, like it smashes into the door.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And they kind of repeat a little bit with the Velociraptor and Ian Malcolm towards the end when he falls through the window and then runs around and gets in the car, and the dinosaur like smashes into him and knocks him into the car and closes the door on him. Like that sequence, again, those animals don't exist. And that sequence is so perfect. I'm like, I felt the impact of that fucking dinosaur headbutting that guy. I felt the terror of Malcolm being chased into the car by a Velociraptor. It's, goddamn, it's good.
My son's in a phase where he's going through all the sort of dinosaur books, and when he saw that dinosaur, he just calls it the headbanger. And then I had to show him the Lost World. I was like, you want to see a headbang? And yeah, he loves that scene where it's so good, like seeing the guy shoot straight through the car pretty much. It's
amazing.
But it's
absolutely amazing.
It's what you're saying, like at the end of the day, you're believing these things are real, right? I mean, that's what the beauty of the first one was. Like that was something that we had never seen on that level. And, we all know the story behind basically without Jurassic Park, we wouldn't have had the prequels because George Lucas saw where the technology was at and go, oh, great, I can make these now. So that's how groundbreaking that was. But we all believe everyone on this episode was a different age when we first saw Jurassic Park, but it all resonated exactly the same thing. There's a real fucking dinosaur on my screen, and you're still seeing that in The Lost World. And I think we would all probably agree that we didn't have that same feeling after this, because but the third one, you know what to expect even more so than the second one, right? And then by the fourth one, it's all on a computer. It's not the same. So kind of like all that visually has gone out the window. But yeah, and like as I said before, like this was promoted as more dinosaurs, like, and just it was all about the more dinosaurs, and you got it. Like you got what you paid for. It wasn't false advertising in the slightest.
All right,
I think if you.
Okay.
I was going to say, if you're talking about the image, between the first and second. I think the first one, it's an oral film. Like the power and the impact and the excitement comes from the sound as much or more than the dinosaurs. Like the T-Rex roaring, that is what makes the T-Rex over the T-Rex's jaw. That's cool, but with the roar. Whereas this one, they don't need to lean on it as much. This one's a far more visual film when it comes to enjoying the dinosaurs, and you can just look at them and get everything. Whereas with the first one, you do need all the elements to really take you on the journey.
Agree.
Yeah, I think that's the magic of movie making. I mean, you have to sell a vision to the audience and make them believe. And you're right. I mean, Ben mentioned it quite early in this podcast. I think one of the things that works for these movies, like you said, like the Brachiosaur in Jurassic Park. I even think some little frames of the Stegosaurus early in this film sometimes struggle. And I would say not at the time and not on the big screen, I still think it holds up. I think, unfortunately, with the upgrades of Blu-ray and now 4K, I think they've even come out. I think they had issues with the way all those CGI effects were done in a computer is so dated now that to upgrade them, it just, unfortunately, you're going to see through it a little bit more, which is a bit sad. I don't know what the cost of them to redo those effects would be for a movie, whether they could somehow redo them. I don't know. But apparently, yeah, the computer programs or files, a lot of them are no longer available as well. I read an article about that. So that's going to be an issue. But I think what sells Jurassic Park as a franchise is the mix of animatronics, which is physically there in that space, with the raptors, the raptor heads, and then especially the T-Rex. They actually have the T-Rex there on set, and then you sort of blend that in with a bit of CGI, is just sells it. I sort of wonder, now that we were having that conversation, I just wonder if there was all CGI right from the get-go and there was no animatronics, would it have stood up as well? But yeah, it's,
Think about other movies around that period.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you know, whatever you think about the 1998 Godzilla, like, I mean, the exception of a foot here and there, I mean, that's kind of probably what you're going to get, like what that Godzilla. I mean, and I'm also thinking of the little Godzillas in that movie more so than the giant one. I mean, that's your issue. I mean, any other movie around that period, just think about creature films then, and that's what you're going to get.
Yeah, anytime they leaned on CG too hard in the 90s, it really it was
Yeah.
always the lighting. They could never get the lighting right on the animals. The bounce of the lighting off, skin or fur or whatever, and it always looked like they Photoshop something into the scene. So I think had they done that in Jurassic Park, you either would have seen dinosaurs and gone, "This movie's crap," or you would have seen, a claw, a snout, and that's it.
yeah.
And then the final scene is just them running and looking over their shoulder, but you never see what's actually over their shoulder.
So like Jaws.
Yeah, it's Jaws. It would have been Jaws. Spielberg would have been like, "Well, we can't afford to show dinosaurs properly, so I guess they'll run into the bush and there'll be a scream, and then a leg will get thrown back out, and then that's that. That's the Velociraptors. We never actually see them because we can't afford it."
Okay, so Ben, last week, me and Angus, as we wind this episode up, we were trying to come up with a rating system for, I guess, a sequel, and we sort of thought, well, you're going to kind of have to put up against the original to a point, and not give it a flat out rating. So I'll go to you, Angus. Like, I mean, what are your thoughts? Now, you said you thought Jaws 2 was 2/3 of a Jaws. Is that right?
Yeah. So for anyone who hasn't listened to the Jaws 2 episode, or for Ben, my theory with sequels is it's a fool's errand to try and look at it standing on its own. It doesn't stand on its own 2 feet. It stands on 1 foot and leans very heavily on the first film. It can't not. So I can't rate it without acknowledging that. So the way that I rated the Jaws 2 film and the way that I think about sequels is I think about how much did I enjoy them of the original. If it's a pie, and if we say Jurassic Park is a full pie, it's a 5-star movie, or 100% of the pie graph is love, how much of that pie graph is getting filled up with Jaws 2, with Jurassic Park 2. I also said that Jaws was like a gourmet meal, and that that Jaws 2 was like an ice cream, and that you can't have the ice cream every day, you feel sick. And so I think that lands with this. So I would say that Jurassic Park is the gourmet meal prepared by the professional chef. It's unflappable. It is perfect. I would say Lost World is like dumplings. Like sometimes you don't want a 5-star meal. Sometimes you want to go to Chinatown and you want a lot of dumplings. No one goes and orders 5 dumplings. You want all the dumplings. You want them. You want any
15
nonsense.
dumplings for $10.
No fucking around. Don't bring me entrees. Don't bring me menu. Bring me 15 deep fried prawn chili dumplings. I'm going to eat too many. I'm going to have them all. Then bring more. Yeah, you can bring some of the Chinese broccoli and oyster sauce if you want as a side. That's fine. I'm here to eat dumplings, and that's Lost World. I'm here to eat dinosaurs. I want to see dinosaurs. I want all of it. I think Jurassic Park 3 it's cold KFC and they got your order wrong. That would be my analogy for that one.
It's not that bad, but it's not great.
Yeah, I think Jurassic World it's like pizza with pineapple on it. Like pizza's great. It's not really what you wanted. You wish it was different, but you'll take it because you love pizza. And I think Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom is you go to the McDonald's drive-through and instead of a cheeseburger, the vendor spits in your mouth.
Oh wow.
So, wow.
Jurassic, I would say
We could keep some of this material for later.
You can edit this out.
That Fallen
I'll give you a nice clean.
Angus.
I'll give you a nice clean edit. I would rate the Lost Worlds in compared to Jurassic Park. I would say it's like 90% of the pie. So whatever you want to call that, you want to call it 4.6 stars or anything like that. I do not love it as much as the original, but I struggle to see how anyone who really loves these movies could, because the first movie gave us that extra something of, oh my God, like there's Stan Winston's T-Rex leaning in and sniffing, and the fog is coming from the nose and the eye is dilating and all of that. And we got Ian Malcolm for the first time, and we got this whole experience for the first time. I think the second one though, it does what I said last time. It expands the world. What do you want when you go to a second Jurassic Park? You do not want the same movie again. You don't want something totally different. You want more, bigger, better. All right, let's get rid of the fences. Let's get rid of all the characters that we care about. Let's have disposable characters. Let's have more dinosaurs. Let's just go balls to the wall. And in the third act, fuck it, it's King Kong, and we're just going to have a T-Rex terrorize San Diego. Is that what you want, people? And everyone, yes, that's what I want. If I want to watch Jurassic Park, I'll watch Jurassic Park. If I want to see dinosaurs go batshit crazy, I'll watch The Lost World. It's freaking great.
Wow.
Then,
how am I meant to top that?
well, you just give me a
Movie's
flat out
good.
rating.
I like it. There you go. No, I really, every year that I get older and every time I watch, because I will watch all the Jurassic Park movies every year. Like it's kind of my thing. Like, you know, I just have to watch them all at least once a year. And yeah, nothing will touch the original. Nothing. Like Jurassic World Dominion could be the greatest movie I've ever seen, but it still won't touch the original, because like Jurassic Park is Jurassic Park. Again, as I said earlier, to me, the greatest movie of all time. But this, I think, satisfies everything. Like I agree with basically everything Angus was saying. It kind of satisfies your needs and everything. Like I've never understood the hate of this movie that some people have in these circles for this franchise. I mean, Jurassic World has come along and kind of people see the franchise in these new lenses. It's like the sequels to the Star Wars. It's, you know, Cable, to use our Survivor analogies, it's like Channel 10 bringing up Australian Survivor. It's like everyone's just so blinded by this flashy new product that they kind of seem to forget what's come before it, you know. And people don't forget Jurassic Park, they just forget the other two sequels. And this is easily the best sequel Jurassic Park has ever had. If I ranked the franchise, this is easily my number 2 film.
Yeah.
And yeah, like if I had to give it out of a 5, it's like, probably going to be like similar, like a 4.6, 4.7. Like it quite doesn't capture the entire brilliance of the first movie. But I mean, there's very few films that do capture the brilliance of that. Like, I mean, we could sit here and maybe name a handful of movies that we would, you know, Spider-Man 2, Empire Strikes Back, like, you know, start naming a couple of them here and there. But yeah, like this, like if I want to watch a movie, if I want to watch like if I'm watching the first Jurassic Park, I feel straight away I have to watch the second one. Like it's just kind of one of those things where it's like, okay, well, I'm on the page now, I may as well keep going. So, yeah, I've never understood the criticism. This is a great film. The score just adds a whole element to it. The acting, just the visual effects, everything about it. So take out the gymnastics scene and maybe you've got like a great
you should be giving me a gymnastics score, right? Because you were an Olympian fan too, so
Jurassic Park is Nadia Comaneci, the perfect 10, And Lost World is Michaela Maroney's not impressed, but she's fine because she still won a gold medal. So that's where we go for it. And then Jurassic Park 3 is like, I don't know, that the one of those Chinese athletes when they were actually like, they were meant to be 16, but they were actually found out to be 13. So like at the end of the day, like you were fine that you watched it and they kind of okay, but like technically it shouldn't be a thing and you feel a bit weird about it. Jurassic World's like Australia in gymnastics at the Olympics. Like we've won 1 silver medal in trampolining, which is that really a thing, but you were still entertained enough by it that you'll accept that we got the medal. And then Fallen Kingdom is the Russia of the gymnastics world because like you shouldn't like it because they're cheats and it's kind of wrong and you see why everybody doesn't like it. But part of you secretly really likes it because somehow you like Russia and think Vladimir Putin's cool. So that to me is how I would rank it.
Wow. That was, I like
It's
that.
3
I like
a.m. I don't know how.
Yeah, well, yes, fair enough. I will admit, I wouldn't say I'm a hater. I've never, and again, the whole purpose of this podcast is probably to give a little bit more back to these movies that have probably been harshly dealt with previously. I'm not a big hater on sequels in general anyway, but the issues I spoke about in this episode irk me a little bit because I feel like you're expecting me to believe just that little bit more that I can't get that far. But overall, I like I said, put it on. I was kind of expecting not to really enjoy it or be bored or checking my phone, but I actually sat there and watched it and didn't get distracted, didn't look at my phone, and Angus summed it up. I forgot that it's such a good movie that there are very minimal times where there's any sort of boring, slow bits or anything. It's very quick paced, beat to beat. It's and it's a lot of fun. And that's all you want. And I guess, again,
Exactly.
That's the point of the sequel. And going back to the conversation me and Angus had about Jaws too, it's like you just want to go back to that world and just have a bit of fun and enjoy it. It doesn't have to be Citizen Kane every time. And, it doesn't have to be an Oscar-winning film. Like, you just want to be the whole idea. And I think this is what irks me about the way we do in general now bash movies and bash actors and directors and stuff like that about movies and whether they're good or bad is movies were there as entertainment. And I just feel like I don't know why we seem to, just act like so, I can't even think of the word now, but so pretentious sometimes about movies. And that wasn't, what, like you go there to be, were you entertained or not? Like, yeah, you might not always like, and like I said, I didn't necessarily love everything about the trailer scene, but overall, the whole package, I love that movie. I love this movie. So, and I'm entertained. And so it succeeded in what it was setting out to achieve. But, but then the reviews and a lot of people don't seem to like it. I don't know. I don't know.
You're so entranced in Cable with your thoughts. I really like listening to it. It's great.
Oh, I just get frustrated. Like, people, I just think we are just generally as a population now, we just seem to be negative about everything. And, I don't know. Look, is it Jurassic Park? No. And like, Angus was saying last week, you cannot replicate, especially when it is such a big movie. Like Jurassic Park was the biggest movie of its time. Jaws was of its time. It's very hard to replicate and get it spot on unless you literally did a shot remake. But
then you called Disney.
Yeah. So it's one of those things. I think it achieved what it set out to do and entertain people. It gave us more dinosaurs visually, but also as a catalog, what's the word I'm thinking of? Well, we saw more dinosaurs, more different species of dinosaurs. We saw stuff we didn't see from the first movie. Like we've already touched on them. No fences. It was a different area, Site B. So it wasn't a complete retread. It gave us some new characters. We only need to see Hammond and a few little cameos, and it was all about Ian Malcolm. And then we saw these other bunch of great actors put on this island, and we had a bit of fun.
Summed it up perfectly. I agree.
So what is that, about 85 out of 100? I don't know.
That sounds like 85.
Yeah. 85.
You were all in, but you weren't totally totally on board 100% of the time, but you didn't walk away going, meh. You loved it. 85 is
Well,
perfect.
Not the Last
Well,
Jedi.
No. Oh, that's the only film that's really.
It's not
really
Jaws
made
of
me-
Revenge. Are you guys covering that in your Jaws coverage?
Wow. We'll get there at one point, I think.
Yeah, we should.
It's a shark having revenge.
Yeah.
and
They
it
do.
roars.
They do. Just like the T Rexes in this one, they got revenge.
Michael Caine's in it.
Yeah, well, I think from that point of view, that's probably another reason why I want to look at that again. Michael Caine being in a movie like that.
But it's a shark that has revenge.
Yeah. Well, what's
What's
the
wrong
point?
with that? Nothing.
What's wrong with that? Again, you don't know what's going on in a shark's head.
We don't,
I mean, they
we
do
don't.
tell us in the first movie that sharks, they're a perfect engine. All they do is
Yeah.
they swim and they eat, and that's it. They don't have any thoughts. But never mind that. It's been a while. Now they have thoughts, and those
It's
thoughts
evolution.
are, I'm a getcha.
I've seen Deep Blue Sea. I see how smart they get. Don't worry. Samuel L. Jackson never saw that motherfucker coming. If he had watched Jaws for the Revenge, he would have.
You would have known. Or Jaws 3, you know.
Yeah.
You
Don't
got to
get too close to the water.
do your homework.
Yep.
Well, on that was our take on Jurassic Park 2, or what they would call the Lost World Jurassic Park. Thank you, Angus, and thank you, Ben.
Thank you. Thanks for having me back.
Racing the suck bands
By definition alone, they're inferior films.
I almost remade a quick warning of this episode is on Twitter with a spoiler for the 4 that screams over the crazy